When a crisis hits, you find out who the real leader is. Those who run, and those who stay. Those who fall, and those who rise again. The difference isn't about who was stronger to begin with. It's about who can still look forward after hitting rock bottom. Zeus, the king of the gods, was completely broken once, in front of everyone, in the most humiliating way possible. His lightning was taken. His strength was stripped away. He was left alone in a dark cave, unable to move a single inch. And here's the strange part. That defeat is exactly what made him a true king. That's the story we're telling today. Not a simple monster-slaying tale. This is about a being who believed he was all-powerful, hitting the floor for the first time, and what he chose to do from there. That's why this myth has survived for thousands of years. Let's get into it. This story doesn't begin on Mount Olympus. It begins in the earth. Deep, dark, burning earth. Somewhere in the very bottom of the world, a rage had been quietly building for a long, long time. Gaia, the goddess of the earth, the mother of everything. The sky, the sea, the mountains, the gods, humanity itself, all of it came from her. She was the oldest force in existence, and she carried a memory that never faded. And inside that memory was fury. Zeus and the Olympian gods had just finished a massive war against the Titans, a conflict known as the Titanomachy. When it was over, Zeus sealed the Titans away in Tartarus, the deepest prison in existence. To Gaia, the Titans were her children. Watching them locked away in that endless darkness was something she could never forgive. A mother's memory doesn't soften with time. It hardens. According to later traditions, Gaia had already tried to fight back once before. She gave rise to the giants and sent them against the gods in a war known as the Gigantomachy. But that attempt failed too, and the defeat only made her anger burn hotter. So she made one final choice. From the deepest part of herself, right where the earth meets Tartarus, she poured everything she had into creating one single being. Something unlike anything that had ever existed. Her last card. That was Typhon. The ancient texts struggle to describe him, and you can feel why. His lower body was a mass of countless writhing serpents, constantly moving, constantly hissing with venom. Above his shoulders rose hundreds of heads, each one howling in a different voice. Some records say it sounded like a lion's roar. Others say it was like a bull or a pack of dogs all at once. When all those sounds hit at the same time, the earth shook and the sky cracked. Fire blazed from his eyes. Not just a glow, actual flames. Anyone who looked directly at him felt their heart freeze. His shoulders reached the heavens. His arms stretched to the edges of the world. His heads scraped through the stars. Hesiod wrote in the Theogony. His strength was great, and his hands tireless in their work. This wasn't just a creature that was big. Typhon did not get tired, and that was the scariest thing about him. Strength eventually runs out, but something that never gets tired will outlast anything. Gaia sent him out with one purpose: tear down Olympus, end the reign of Zeus, finish the revenge of the earth, and Typhon began to move. That day, Olympus was peaceful. The gods were each doing what gods do. Aphrodite was probably talking about beauty. Ares was sharpening his strategies. Apollo was playing music. The light on Olympus was brilliant and calm, the way it always was. Nobody knew that peace was about to shatter. First, the ground trembled. The pillars of Olympus began to shake. Then came the sound. Hundreds of voices screaming at once, serpents hissing, the earth tearing open. And then the gods saw it. Typhon. Apollodorus recorded what happened next in just one sentence. The gods fled in terror to Egypt. That's it. One sentence. The complete retreat of every god on Olympus, written in a single line. Think about what that means. These were gods who had survived the war against the Titans, gods who had defeated the giants, and they ran, without a fight, the moment they saw him. Some scholars note that Athena may have been among the few who stayed, but most sources agree that the majority of the gods fled without hesitation. There's a reason this scene doesn't read like an exaggeration. Some fear is so absolute that it bypasses courage entirely. No matter how brave you are, how wise, how powerful, when something crosses that line, instinct wins. According to some traditions, the gods transformed into animals to hide their identities as they fled into Egypt. The shining, magnificent gods of Olympus, reduced to creatures running across fields and rivers. It wasn't glorious. It was raw panic. But in the middle of all that chaos, one figure didn't move: Zeus. Was he unafraid? I don't think so. When he looked at that enormous shape, when he met those blazing eyes, he must have felt the same terror as everyone else. But he stayed. Because he was the king. Because someone had to. The weight of responsibility was just slightly heavier than the weight of fear. Just slightly. And that small difference changed everything. With every other god gone, Zeus stood alone and raised his lightning bolt. Not a moment of glory. Not a dramatic, heroic entrance. Just one figure, alone, facing the thing everyone else had run from. Some would call it foolish. But history, mythology, and something deep in all of us, we call it something else: courage. The first battle between Zeus and Typhon was beyond anything that had come before. Every bolt Zeus threw split the sky open. His lightning had brought down titans and giants. No force in existence had ever withstood it. But Typhon was different. The lightning hit him. He staggered. He didn't fall. This wasn't just about physical strength. Typhon had been built from everything Gaia had. The force of the earth, the weight of darkness, the raw energy of primordial chaos. All of it fused into one being. Zeus's lightning wasn't enough. And then the moment came. Typhon rushed him. According to the myth, Typhon severed the sinews from Zeus's hands and feet, cutting away the very source of his movement and strength. Zeus couldn't throw his lightning, couldn't take a single step, couldn't resist. The king of the gods was completely powerless. Typhon hid what he had taken inside a bearskin. Then he carried Zeus to a cave, known in some accounts as the Corycian Cave. Others call it the Cilician Cave, a deep, lightless place far from the world. The king of the gods was locked in a cave. No lightning, no strength, no allies. This is the lowest point in the entire story. Not just because Zeus lost, but because of what his defeat meant. If Zeus falls, Olympus falls. If Olympus falls, the order of the gods falls with it. And if that order collapses, the world returns to primal chaos. That was exactly what Gaia had been waiting for. Revenge. And the return of disorder. It was almost within reach. Alone in the dark, unable to do anything, Zeus waited. What was going through his mind in that cave, we can't know for certain. But one thing is clear. That darkness was not the end of the story. There's always an unexpected variable. In the deepest moments of despair, hope tends to show up from the last place you'd expect. In this story, that hope had a name: Hermes. And alongside him, another name, Aigipan. Hermes was the messenger of the gods. Fast, clever, constantly crossing boundaries between worlds. He wasn't the strongest god. He was the most resourceful. The one who could get in anywhere, talk to anyone, and find a path where there was none. Aigipan is described in some traditions as a goat-formed divine being closely connected to Pan, though the two aren't always treated as exactly the same figure. Like Hermes, he was more connected to the wild earth than to the polished world of Olympus. These two decided to act, to do something almost impossible, to go after what Typhon had taken. The problem was simple. The execution was extremely dangerous. Whatever Typhon had hidden was under his watch, and going at it directly would mean instant defeat. Direct force wasn't the answer. The only option was something else entirely. Cleverness. Hermes had always been that kind of god. From the day he was born, he tricked Apollo and hid his cattle without leaving a trace. It was built into him. Some accounts say Hermes disguised himself to get close to Typhon. Others say Aigipan played music on his pipes, drawing Typhon's attention away while Hermes moved in. The details shift depending on the source, but the result is the same. Hermes and Aigipan outmaneuvered Typhon with wit and speed, and they got back what had been taken. There's something deeper here than just recovering Zeus's strength. The most powerful being alive had just been defeated. What saved the situation wasn't more power, it was speed, cleverness, flexibility, the qualities that brute force doesn't have. This myth figured that out thousands of years ago. In any organization, in any era, no single hero carries the whole thing. It's the ones working behind the scenes, finding angles no one else sees, quietly doing what needs to be done. That's who keeps things going when the strongest one falls. The moment his strength returned, something shifted in Zeus's eyes. It wasn't the light of lightning. It was something else. The look of someone who had lost everything, sat with it, and then chose to stand back up. That look has a name too: resolve. The second fight was fundamentally different from the first. Looking at it through a modern lens, it seems like Zeus had learned something from that first defeat. Not just that Typhon was powerful, but that throwing lightning with everything you have, straight ahead, wasn't going to work. The second time, he moved differently, reading Typhon's patterns, looking for openings, striking with precision instead of force. One loss had taught him more than any victory ever could. Know your enemy. Know your limits. Find the next approach. In the first fight, Zeus was fighting with fear pressing down on him. In the second, he was someone who had already been through the worst. When you have nothing left to lose, you fight differently. You've already seen the bottom. There's nothing left to be afraid of. Typhon began to retreat. This enormous, unstoppable force was starting to feel something it hadn't felt before. The pursuit stretched across regions, eventually reaching the area near Sicily. Typhon fought back by ripping up mountains and hurling them. Some accounts say the mountains he threw landed in the sea and became islands. That's the scale of what was happening. The sky and earth were coming apart at the seams. And then the final moment arrived. Zeus gathered everything he had, his strength, his will, his purpose, the weight of everything he was protecting, and brought it all down on Typhon. The mountain, now known as Mount Etna, came crashing down on top of him. The creature with hundreds of heads, the force that had brought the king of the gods to his knees, was sealed beneath it. Typhon didn't disappear. In these myths, ancient forces rarely vanish completely, but he could no longer threaten the world. Locked deep beneath Mount Etna, connected to the darkness of Tartarus below, the ancient Greeks said that whenever Etna erupted, it was because Typhon was still down there, still raging, still trying to break free. Mount Etna is still active today. It still erupts. That story never really ended. The story closes with Zeus victorious. But the moment I keep coming back to isn't the victory. It's two other moments. The moment when every other god had gone, and Zeus stood alone with his lightning raised. And the moment after the cave, when his strength came back, and he opened his eyes, looked straight ahead, and got back up. Those two moments are what this story is really about. I'm not here to judge the gods who ran. That reaction was human, deeply human. When something is overwhelming enough, survival instinct takes over. That's not weakness. That's biology. But someone stayed, and that someone got knocked down, got back up, and finished it. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward while the fear is still there. Zeus didn't stay because he wasn't scared. He stayed because the responsibility of being king was just barely heavier than the terror he felt. just barely. And that barely was enough to change the outcome. And one more thing worth remembering. Zeus couldn't do it alone. It was Hermes and Aigipan who got back what was taken. When the most powerful figure collapsed, the ones who stepped up were the fastest, the most resourceful, the most loyal. No crisis in history has ever been solved by one person alone. The ones working quietly in the background, the ones showing up when it matters most. They're the reason the king got to rise again.
This is what Greek mythology is still telling us, thousands of years later. Right now, somewhere, someone is sitting in their own cave. They've lost a job, or a relationship, or something they built their whole life around. That feeling of being completely stuck, unable to move, unable to fight back. Zeus felt that too. The king of the gods wasn't exempt. But Zeus didn't walk out of that cave because his power returned. He walked out because he still had a reason to fight. Something worth protecting. Something worth standing up for. The order of the gods, Olympus, and the responsibility of being who he was. Those reasons pulled him back to his feet. That's what this myth understood before any of us were born. People rise when they have a reason to. The strength comes second. The reason comes first. When you find the reason, the strength follows. If you're in the cave right now, start there. Ask yourself why you need to get back up. The moment you find that answer, your Hermes will show up. What this story leaves us with is not the image of an all-powerful god who never failed. It's the image of one who came back after he did. That's the version of Zeus history remembered. The one who walked out of the dark.
Mount Etna is still erupting. Typhon is still down there. And Zeus is still king. Stories like this one, where a single moment, a single choice, a single act of courage changed the fate of an entire age. They don't belong only to ancient Greece. History is full of them. Next time, we'll look at another one. A different myth, a different world, but the same question at the heart of it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.